Next up, we have Celia Eves. She is the Outreach Administrator for the Public Utility Commission of Texas. Celia joined the PUC in February of 2020 in the Division of Utility Outreach. The division provides outreach, education, and assistance to retail public utilities. Celia has over 25 years of experience in the water and sewer industry. Before joining the PUC, she worked at TRWA, where she served as the Environmental Services and Training Director, providing compliance training, treatment and regulatory guidance, and associated retail to public utilities. She has served as a committee member on the Water Conservation Advisory Council and the Water Utility Operator Licensing Advisory Committee. Celia holds a BS in chemistry and a licensed Class B surface water operator. Celia?
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good to see everyone here. As they stated, I am with the Public Utility Commission. I'm in the Division of Utility Outreach. I also have Lisa Fuentes here with me as well with the PUC. So we're here to answer any questions that y'all have. As Wendy stated earlier, we're in the Division of Utility Outreach. We're here to actually provide any type of assistance that we can to you, the regulated community. So any questions that y'all have, even outside of the scope of today's presentation, please feel free to reach out to us. All right, so for today, we're going to be talking about the critical facility filing, which I hope everyone has completed already, emergency preparedness plan, and consumer protection rules. So let's take a look at the first one. Everyone knows as a result of Winter Storm Uri, we had a lot of statute law implementation, and we subsequently had some rules and stuff that we had to adopt. So one of the things as a result of Winter Storm Uri, and as probably you've heard throughout Winter Storm Uri, one of the things that was recognized was the fact that we needed to have better communication amongst each other. And so there was a requirement for retail public utility. Actually, what they added was a new amended definition of affected utility. So when the law was passed, essentially what it said is, if you meet the definition of an affected utility, then you're required to comply with some of these new laws. And so who exactly met the definition of an affected utility? So the definition actually includes a retail public utility. So if you're a water system and you are providing water service and you charge, you're considered a retail public utility, regardless of whether you're a water supply corporation, a municipality, or a district. If you charge for water service, you are a retail public utility. It also included exempt utilities. So in Texas, we have very small water systems who don't even meet the definition of a public water system. So they're less than 15 connections. But they provide water service and they charge for that water service. So they're allowed to also to register with us at the PUC as an exempt utility. So this applies to them as well. It also included anyone that was a provider or a conveyor of potable or raw water service, and any of these types of entities that furnish water service to more than one customer met this definition of an affected utility. It also said that you are an affected utility if you meet this, but that you're not an affected utility under 13.1395, because like I said, this was an added amended definition. So they're already in Chapter 13 of the Water Code. There already existed a definition for affected utility, but it was very specific for those utilities in Fort Bend and Harris County, because for years they've been plagued with hurricanes. And so they, for years, have already had to have emergency preparedness plans in place already. So this new definition pretty much encompassed pretty much everyone else, right, in the state of Texas. So if you met this definition, you are an affected utility. So what did it require you to do? What it did is it required you, as an affected utility, to identify what facilities within your water or wastewater system you believe may qualify for critical load status. Okay, so what exactly does that mean? Because actually, critical load status, there isn't a definition for it in Chapter 13 of the Water Code. But what we do have in Chapter 25, which are the rules related to electricity, is we have a critical load public safety customer. And this is where everyone here falls in. So a critical load public safety customer is a customer for whom electric service is considered crucial for the protection and maintenance of public safety. So who falls under a critical load public safety customer? We're talking about hospitals, fire stations, police stations, and guess what? Water and wastewater facilities. So you're required to identify what part of your facilities within your infrastructure do you feel should qualify for critical load status. So that essentially meant your electric provider, your transmission distribution provider, your retail public provider needed to be aware that you exist out there and the services that you provide. So in the event that hopefully we don't have events like we did with Winter Storm Uri, they're able to know that you out there, they understand the service that you provide and why it's so important, and why when it comes to being able, if they can, decide where they have to shed or not, they identify that you're there in the area. Or in the cases which, like Winter Storm Uri, there was such a great outage and stuff that, you know, they sometimes just didn't have a choice. Everyone was pretty much shut off the grid and stuff. But it allowed them to still identify you so that when they began the process of restoring service, you know, they knew that you're out there, what you do, and hopefully could restore you, you know, priority compared to someone else who may not be a critical load public safety facility. So what you're required to do in order to comply with this law was actually identify the facilities that were critical, identify a primary point of contact under these emergency situations, an alternate point of contact, and also provide a general description of these facilities and where they are. It required you to provide the information to TETA, the Texas Department of Emergency Management, to your local county emergency coordinator, and it also required you to provide this information to your transmission distribution provider, your TDU, and your retail electric provider. Because really, it's the TDU who's going to actually review the information that you give them and determine whether they're going to give you that status or not. So you had to provide it to them. You also had to provide this information to us at the PUC. And so for us at the PUC, we actually didn't have any prescribed form or format that you have to do to file with us. You just had to make sure that you provided us the information. And what we did is we actually created what we call a project or a docket number. So everything at the PUC is pretty much online electronic. When you file something with us, whether it's an application, anything is electronic. It makes it easy for you. It makes it easy, quite frankly, for even processing of applications because it's fully transparent. Anyone can go in there and see exactly who's filed what. And so you were required to file that with us. This critical facility information filing was actually due November the 1st, 2 years ago. But we also now have a requirement, because it actually is in 13.1396 of their water code, that requires you to annually update that with your TDU and retail electric provider. And so make sure that you are doing that if you haven't done it already. So we also did, in order to kind of keep track of any updates and stuff, we created this new project or docket number 53938. So if you haven't filed your critical facility information with us, make sure that you do that. You can file it in this docket. If your TDU is requiring you now to update this information, make sure that when you update with them that you also update with us as well. Now, I have heard from some utilities that said, hey, I reached out to my TDU and said, hey, I know I need to do this annually, and they actually said, like, no, you're good. You don't have to do it annually. So, I mean, I would just check with them to see whether they want updated information. Obviously, if you're a utility that's growing, adding more infrastructure, you would want to make sure that you're updating it, especially if that new infrastructure is something that you consider critical to your facilities. The other requirement under the Senate Bill 3 as an affected utility is it required you to also submit emergency preparedness plans. So these emergency preparedness plans obviously are first submitted to TCEQ, so you have to meet TCEQ, submit them to TCEQ. But once they are approved with the TCEQ, the law also requires you to file this information with the Public Utility Commission. So once you receive approval for your emergency preparedness plan, you want to make sure that you are also filing it online with us at the PUC. And what we do is we have a docket. It's 52272. So when you go to the PUC's website, at the very top of our webpage, you'll actually see a tab that says Filings. You go to that Filings tab, click on it. The first page it's going to take you to, the very first top thing is going to say PUC Interchange Filer. That's where you're going to submit your emergency preparedness plan. And obviously your plan has a lot of sensitive, information specific to your utility. So our interchange filer, when you submit with us, actually has a little option for you to actually check off confidential. So when you submit something with us online, the very first thing it's going to ask you for is, hey, first enter in the control or the docket number. So when you submit your EPP with us, you're going to type in that 52272, and right underneath that, it says confidential. You click on that box, and when you upload your EPP, it is automatically confidential. So because everything, like I said, is pretty transparent with filings at the PUC, you can rest assured that anyone who's interested in who's filed an emergency preparedness plan under this docket number is going to be able to see that you, the facility, submitted something. But if you mark it confidential, they're not going to be able to see the specific information that was filed. This was another requirement that passed during Senate Bill 3 during the previous legislative session. And so there were two sections added to Water Code, 13.151 and 13.414. Something new, pretty big. And so what it did is it established some new customer service protection rules. And essentially what it did is it established these protection rules for customers whenever there is an extreme weather event. And so the statute actually defined what is an extreme weather event. And the way they defined it in Chapter 13 says that extreme weather event is any period where the previous day's highest temperature did not exceed 28 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's predicted that the temperature for the next 24 hours is going to remain at or below 28 degrees, according to your nearest National Weather Service. So that's the way they described extreme weather events. So we've had, some utilities ask us, well, what about the summer? Because it gets hot here in Texas, right? So the way they passed this specific provision in the law clearly defined this only to meet this criteria. So it didn't address hot temperatures or anything. It's specific to an extreme weather event as defined here. All right, so for these customer protection, these new rules, new requirements, who is required to comply? So the way the law passed is it said essentially, if you're an investor-owned utility, if you are a water supply or sewer service corporation, if you are a district, or if you are in affected counties, this law and the rules that we adopted at the PUC, guess what? They apply to you. Who's missing off the list? Who's not on the list that provides service? Cities. So cities, the way the law passed, it actually excluded cities from this definition, or from who has to actually apply with this. So if you're a city in here, and I know we have some cities in here, don't shut down on me. Keep on listening, because perhaps, these might be customer service protection rules that you might, consider. So this is pretty new. This is pretty new. So when it comes to customer service rules, much of the PUC rules are specific for who? Investor-owned utilities. if you look at our Chapter 24 rules at the PUC, a lot of the rules in there are actually apply to only the private investor-owned utilities. When it comes to water supply corporations, districts and stuff, I mean, typically, y'all have the ability to adopt the customer service policies that you have. You get to say, you know, when bills are due, when they're disconnected or not. You know, you get to establish those customer service protection rules. So this is really something new for water supply corporations, for districts, and for affected counties. This is really new, but it does require you to comply with this specific, new provisions in the law. All right, so we've actually have adopted the law into rules, into our Chapter 24 rules. So we added Chapter 24.173 in our rules, and essentially what the law and what the rule says is that during an extreme weather event, you are prohibited from imposing a late fee on a bill that was due during an extreme weather event. You're also prohibited from disconnecting someone for service for non-payment of a bill that was due during an emergency weather event. So those are the two big things. Can't charge them a late fee, can't disconnect them. So the rules also require you, and the law actually requires you to offer a payment schedule if requested by an affected customer. And so we get this question now, you know, a lot of people trying to understand. So the way the law passes, it says payment schedule. So we get the question, does that mean I have to give them a payment plan? Well, actually, the way the law passed, it says schedule. Didn't say payment plan, it said schedule. So that essentially means it's going to be up to you, the utility, whether you're an IOU or you're water supply corporation, or whether you're a district. You know, if you want to offer to set an established date of when the bill's now going to be due, and if you want to offer them, you know, a payment option where they pay a portion of the bill, however you want to divide it up, and or if you decide otherwise that, hey, payment schedule to us is going to mean that we're allowing you extra time to pay your bill, it's going to be due on this date, but you're going to have to pay it in full. That is something that you have discretion, you know, as a utility. But it does require you to actually offer them this payment schedule. The other thing that we did is because, again, since this was very, very new, very different, we actually also required that you provide a one-time written notice, both in English and Spanish, to your customers by January 31st, 2023, making them aware that this is a customer service protection that you're able to offer them during an extreme weather event. So you are required to actually detail out what the new rule, what the new law says to your customers and make them aware of this new requirement. So we actually created, the PUC, we created a template sample language form that you can use to provide to your customers. And so the deadline said January 31st, 2023. Everyone that this applies to in here, y'all did that, right? Yeah. Jack's giving me the thumbs up, so Jack's speaking on behalf of everyone. Thanks, Jack. So if you didn't, please make sure that you, when you return back to your utility, that you work on making sure that you get this done. So there isn't a requirement that you provide proof to the PUC. That wasn't in the law. That actually also even wasn't in the rules when we adopted them. But we highly recommend that when you sent out this one-time notice to your customers, and again, it's a one-time notice by January 31st, 2023, if you've passed it, to make sure that you keep good documentation and good records showing that you did it. So in the event that we have a customer call and say, hey, you know, during this extreme weather event, or I didn't, you know, I got disconnected, I didn't receive notice and stuff, you're able to, again, show proof that you did comply with this provision in the rules, so that, again, we can demonstrate that. Because the other thing that the law required for us to do at the PUC is to actually establish a classification system to be used by a court to impose civil penalties for violations of 24.173. So if you do not abide by the law, guess what? You can have civil penalties. So the interesting thing about this provision in the law is that it required PUC to actually adopt a classification system for violations of this customer protection. But guess what? PUC, we actually don't administer civil penalties. Guess who does that? The court, the Attorney General's office. So essentially, if you're going to receive a fine for violating any provision in the law, in our rules, it's actually going to be suit that is filed by the Attorney General's office and not the PUC. We're obviously going to have our rules, our classification system, you know, that they're going to look at and identify to make sure whether this utility actually, you know, met the provisions in the law and in the rule. And it does. It talks to different things like, hey, are they in violation of not having provided notice? I think probably the more egregious ones are going to be, did you disconnect people when you shouldn't have disconnected them, and what was the potential impact and, you know, an effect to the customers when that happened, if it did happen. So that's something to keep in mind. All right, so that's about all that I have. Yes, sir.
When you were talking a while ago about all this billing and responsibility the Public Utility Commission has with the cities and the water department and all of them, who would take over if a privately owned or a public municipality had filed bankruptcy or default, kind of like New York City in 1975, and they didn't have money to pay bills, and we just can't shut down the system because people rely on it and it's their lives. And that probably includes maybe police and fire, but strictly utilities, you know, because now they don't have money to pay the electric bills, and they maybe buy water and then resell it wholesale, but, you know, they're broke, and now who would take over, and you just can't shut down the system or plug up a sewer.
So our jurisdiction with regards to municipalities is very limited. We're not going to have that type of authority. If it was a private investor-owned utility that is going to go into foreclosure, we actually do have provisions in our rules that require them to actually notify us and stuff. In fact, there's a provision as well that I think requires them to also notify and make TCEQ aware of that. I would probably say that beyond that, you know, I don't know if it potentially might be the Attorney General's office and stuff, because they do have under civil remedies and practice code, they have the ability to bring suit sometimes against others. But as far as that particular thing with us at the PUC, when it comes to municipalities, we have limited jurisdiction. If you're a municipality, though, that holds a CCN, we do have jurisdictions with regards to your CCN, your requirements, and how you respond to requests for service from potential applicants in that area. And I'm going to jump over here, I think, because, Jack, did you have your?
My question was related to that. Some municipalities have CCNs. If they hold a CCN, are they subject to the utility rule? No, they're exempt from that even though they hold a CCN.
Exactly. So the way the specific language in the law actually said, for those that are required to possess a certificate of convenience and necessity. And so those that are required in Texas by statute to hold a CCN are actually two types of entities, two types of retail public utility entities: an investor-owned utility and a water supply corporation. Those are the only two by law that are required to hold a CCN if you're going to be providing water and charging for it. But the law also added, it said, these customer service protection rules apply to those that are required to have a CCN, and then it also said, and districts and affected counties. So it specifically named districts and affected counties. Who it left out was municipalities.
Is there, in that regard, is there any other provision in any other statute that you guys don't enforce that imposes an analogous requirement on the municipalities?
With regards to an extreme weather event, there isn't. There isn't that requirement. I will say that, and I don't know that it's going anywhere, but there's actually a bill right now specific to municipalities, not with regards to an extreme weather event, but there is a bill right now, and the last time I checked it, Jack, it looks like it's not going to go very far. I don't know that it's going to make it in time to go. I don't think it's made it out of one of the committees. But it was actually specific to municipalities. And actually, in that particular bill, what they were proposing to do is to actually establish when a city can pose a late fee and what the late fee penalty is. But whether that's actually going to pass during this legislative session, again, not related to an extreme weather event, but again, the key point is that, like you mentioned, it's municipalities typically have the authority, they have the express authority to adopt the rules, the policies that they have with regards to customer service protection and stuff. And again, when bills are due, when you disconnect, when they charge you a late fee and all this stuff. For other types of utilities like IOUs specifically, it's the PUC. We have original jurisdiction. That means that those private utilities can't charge anything that we say that isn't already expressly given to them within our rules.
Thank you, Celia. We have now reached the part of our program that involves the hands-on generator maintenance portion. So if you all gather up your things, we're going to be moving out into the parking lot to get 2 presentations on generators. Thank you.